What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we're going to be talking about my top 36 wide receivers as we head into week 10 of the fantasy football season. And speaking of heading into week 10, you guys know we got a Thursday night football game coming up. Underdog is giving us a new customer free pick where if you sign up using our code LeagueFFB and Lamar Jackson goes for 1 total yard, you will win. That being said, if you want to support the show, if you want to take advantage of that special offer from Underdog, make sure you use code LeagueFFB. It is the best way to support this show. Not only will you get that Lamar Jackson free pick, but you'll also get up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you use that code LeagueFFB. So make sure you use that code or go down to the link in the description, the link in the top of the comment section, and sign up using that. But without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about these top 36 wide receivers. So as you can see, I have the tier maker pulled up on the screen. Today, we got 7 tiers to get through, stemming from the elite wide receiver 1s all the way down to your low-end wide receiver 3s. But let's kick it off in tier 1. I got 3 wide receivers to talk about, and we'll keep it nice and brief. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown. These are my top 3 plays at the wide receiver position this week. All of these guys have great matchups. Justin Jefferson gets the Jaguars, Jamar Chase gets the Baltimore Ravens, and Amon-Ra St. Brown gets the Houston Texans. Now, all of those teams are ranked in the bottom 8 at the wide receiver position defensively, so they're giving up tons of fantasy points to that wide receiver position. You should be smash playing every single one of these guys. These guys are going to be great here in week 10. Now, let's move on to tier 2. Tier 2 is those high-end wide receiver 1s, and I got 3 guys in this tier as well. Coming in at 4, I got Tyreek Hill. We also got Malik, Nabers, and A.J. Brown in this tier 2. So Tyreek Hill, he gets a really good matchup as well. He gets to play on the road at the Los Angeles Rams, and that's on Monday Night Football, but they're currently ranked 26th against the wide receiver right now, giving up 30.6 fantasy points per game. So we haven't had the big day from Tyreek Hill yet with Tua Tagovailoa back in the lineup. I think that could be coming this week. This is still a top 5 play for me. And the only other guy I really want to talk about is A.J. Brown. I do have him here as a top 6 play. Now, he is questionable with a knee injury. He obviously didn't play in the second half of that game last week. I think he's going to be able to go. If he doesn't, for whatever reason, obviously he's going to be pulled out of these rankings, but I'm going to be ranking him as if he's playing this week. So if he plays, make sure you plug him in as a high-end wide receiver 1. Now let's move on to my tier 3. My tier 3 is the low-end wide receiver 1s, and I got 6 guys to round out the rest of these players. You got Deebo Samuel at 7, Garrett Wilson, Zay Flowers, Cooper Kupp, CeeDee Lamb, and Puka Nacua to finish out the top 12. Now, obviously, we have both of these Rams wide receivers in here, and CeeDee Lamb is in here as well. Obviously, we can talk about why he is down in the low-end wide receiver 1s, but let's start at number 7. I want to talk about Deebo Samuel. He gets a really good matchup against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has been giving up quite a few points to wide receivers this year, currently ranking 27th, so it should be an easy matchup for Deebo Samuel. They're giving up 31.4 fantasy points per game. No Brandon Ayuk in the lineup, obviously. Christian McCaffrey may be back in this game as well. We'll talk about that maybe in the running back episode. But Deebo Samuel, he's going to be questionable with a rib injury. He should be playing. If he does, he's going to be a guy that I think is going to be a great play at the wide receiver position, and probably a guy that maybe even could teeter into that high-end wide receiver 1 tier, but just because of the injury, we're going to drop him down here into the low end. But with Deebo out of the way, let's talk about a couple tough matchups. It is those Rams wide receivers. Now, we know how good these Rams wide receivers are. They do get force-fed. Matthew Stafford's been looking great. Cooper Kupp, I got him at 10, and Puka at 12. They do play against the Miami Dolphins. Now, the Miami Dolphins are 4th best against the wide receiver position right now. They're only giving up 21.8 fantasy points per game. Now, I do believe that this number is a little bit deceiving. When you look at this number, you got to put into the context that they've played a lot of teams without Tua on the lineup, and if that is the case, they've had a lot of games where they're just not scoring a ton of points. Games are slow. Teams are running the football against a Miami Dolphins team that they're blowing out. So I think that that number is a little bit deceiving. Obviously, these guys are so good in their own right that they kind of are matchup proof for the most part. I still have them as top 12 plays and players that I think are low-end wide receiver 1s this week. And then CeeDee Lamb, we got to talk about the elephant in the room. Dak Prescott headed towards IR. It is going to be Cooper Rush under center, and you also have CeeDee Lamb, who is questionable with the shoulder injury as well. A lot of this mixed together does kind of have some bad vibes for CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, the talent speaks for itself. It's still a guy that when you're looking at him in your lineup, you probably need to keep plugging him in. Similar to what we did with Tyreek Hill when Tua was out of the lineup. I don't expect it to be that bad. I think Cooper Rush is a much better quarterback than the guys that Tyreek Hill was playing with when Tua was out. But CeeDee Lamb, we're obviously not looking at him as an elite wide receiver 1 right now with Dak Prescott out of the lineup. So let's move on to my tier 4. My tier 4 has 5 wide receivers in it. We'll go from 13 with his Devontae Smith, Brian Thomas Jr., Drake London, Devontae Adams, and I got Terry McLaurin to round out this tier. Really, two main players I want to talk about in this tier. The first one being Brian Thomas Jr. He gets the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings are currently ranked dead last against wide receivers right now. This is a team that's giving up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers, and Brian Thomas Jr., we kind of got some news today that I'm not putting it into consideration right now until we get some more news. Trevor Lawrence, he's a little bit banged up, but right now, Brian Thomas, with this matchup where they're giving up 37.5 fantasy points per game to wide receivers, and the way that he's played this year, this is a guy that I think you got to throw into the lineup. He's going to have a very solid week. I got him as a top 15 play, and that might even feel a little bit too low. I didn't want to get too crazy moving him up, but I am very excited about Brian Thomas here this week. And then Drake London, he's questionable with a hip injury. He obviously didn't play the second half of last week's game. He did miss the rest of that one. I think he can play. They said it's day to day. If he plays, you're still throwing him into your lineup, and New Orleans is who he plays. They just traded Marshawn Lattimore, so they're going to be lighter at the cornerback position, so should be good things for Drake London. Obviously, guys like Devonta Smith, if A.J. Brown does not play, who is questionable with that injury, you're going to move him up the rankings as well. So let's move on to Tier 5 here, though. Tier 5 is going to have 7 players. We're going to go from wide receiver 18 all the way to wide receiver 24, and that's going to round out those low-end wide receiver 2s. I got Tank Dell, George Pickens, Darnell Mooney, DeAndre Hopkins, Khalil Shakir, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Josh Downs to round out this tier. Now, there's a couple matchups to talk about as well. The first one being Tank Dell's. Tank Dell, he gets a good matchup against Detroit. They've been very, very light against wide receivers this year, currently ranking 30th out of those 32 teams, obviously, giving up 34.4 fantasy points per game. With Nico Collins maybe back into the lineup, I don't think he's actually going to be back into the lineup this week. I am projecting Tank Dell to be here by himself. You're going to notice Tank Dell is not in these rankings this week. So I do think that Tank Dell goes out there solo. This is going to be a smash play. We saw what he did last week when he was the #1 wide receiver in this offense. He's going to get some good plays. He's going to get some good looks downfield. He's going to score some fantasy football points. I think he's a top 20 play at the wide receiver position this week. And then some tough matchups. Let's talk about 2 of them. I want to go to wide receiver 23, Marvin Harrison Jr. This is a tough matchup against the New York Jets. He's going to see a lot of Sauce Gardner. They are currently the #1 defense against wide receivers, only giving up 21.5 fantasy points per game. So you might see him behind guys like Khalil Shakir, Darnell Mooney, and say, man, we really like the talent of Marvin Harrison. It's a tough matchup. This offense has been inconsistent. I think he's still a low-end wide receiver too, but there's quite a bit of players that I still would play over Marvin Harrison Jr. this week. And then the last guy I want to talk about, Josh Downs, wide receiver 24. He has been great pretty much the entire time that he's been healthy this year. He's outproduced Michael Pittman Jr., Joe Flacco under center. We've talked about how maybe that should help the wide receivers. Last week it didn't. Josh Downs, however, he gets to play against the Buffalo Bills, who are a top 5 defense against the wide receiver position. I don't know what this Joe Flacco experience is going to be. I'm still playing Josh Downs as a wide receiver 2 this week, but I'm tempering the expectations based off of what we saw from Flacco last week. The chance that maybe if Flacco goes out and has another dud performance, they turn it back over to Anthony Richardson, maybe even in the second half, and then a tough matchup against Buffalo. Yeah, all these things considered, I'm tempering the expectations with Josh Downs this week. Now let's move on to my tier 6. Tier 6, we got a lot of things to talk about. 6 wide receivers, and I'm probably going to talk about 5 of them at least. Coming in at wide receiver 25, I got Jordan Addison. 26, Jalen Waddle. I got DJ Moore, Jameson Williams, Ladd McConkey, and Cortland Sutton is going to finish the last one. Cortland Sutton right here. So that is going to be that entire tier of those high-end wide receiver 3s. I think we can briefly touch on Jordan Addison, Jalen Waddle, and Jameson Williams because like we said with both Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill, and I guess even the third guy, Amon-Ra St. Brown, all of those guys have easy matchups playing teams that are bottom 8 against wide receivers. That is the same for these wide receiver 2s. So Jordan Addison should get the same good matchup that Jefferson has, Waddle the same as Tyreek, and Jameson the same as Amon-Ra St. Brown. Pretty easy math. These guys should have some pretty good weeks and some pretty easy matchups to go against as well. Now, maybe on a not so positive note, you have some tough matchups for some guys here in Ladd McConkey and Cortland Sutton. Ladd McConkey, he gets the Tennessee Titans. They are currently the 3rd best defense against wide receivers, only giving up about 21.7 fantasy points per game. So it should be a little bit of a tougher matchup. That said, Justin Herbert and the Chargers, they've been throwing it a little bit more. They've been relying on Ladd McConkey a little bit more, so he should still have a decent floor even in a tough matchup. And Cortland Sutton, he has been target hog for the Denver Broncos. It is a tough matchup against Kansas City. Kansas City likes to shut down that #1 wide receiver. They're probably going to try and do the same to Cortland Sutton here this week. They're a top 6 defense against the wide receiver position, and they're just such a good team overall that it's really hard to score against them. So Bo Nix might struggle. Cortland Sutton, he's probably going to struggle. Kansas City's going to do their best to make this a very slow-paced, low-scoring game against the Denver Broncos. And then let's go to our last and final tier, tier 7, those low-end wide receiver 3s. We're going to go from 31 to 36, and we'll finish this one off. Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, Juwan Jennings, Rome Odunze, Xavier Legette, and Michael Pittman Jr. That finishes off the top 36 for me. Let's talk about a couple of these guys. Calvin Ridley, he hits that tough matchup against the Los Angeles Chargers. We did talk about it being tough for Ladd McConkey. Well, guess what? The Chargers are also really good against the wide receiver position as well. This is currently the 7th best defense, giving up 22.4 fantasy points per game. So Ridley should have a tough game as well. Amari Cooper, he missed last week with a wrist injury. Still going to be questionable. We'll see if that keeps him out this week. I am projecting him to play, but it does feel like right now he's not worked into that number 1 role. It's still Khalil Shakir, who is the number 1 target. And then you got Juwan Jennings, an easy matchup with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We talked about that with Deebo Samuel. Should remain the same for Juwan Jennings. He was questionable with a hip coming into this one as well. Did not play last week. If he plays, he should be the number 2 target in this offense. And last but not least, we talked about the tough matchup for Josh Downs. The same applies for Michael Pittman Jr., but Michael Pittman Jr., he slowly creeps his way into this top 36. I want to shout out the 2 rookies as well before we get out of here. Rome Odunze and Xavier Legette. They have been leading their teams in receiving over the last couple of weeks. I think these 2 guys are kind of second half breakouts, so let's keep an eye on these guys over the next couple of weeks. But right now in week 10, they're just some low-end wide receiver 3s. So there you have it, folks. That is my top 36 wide receivers as we head into week 10 of the fantasy football season. I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but if you want to win big yourself on Thursday Night Football, not just looking for some fantasy football, but maybe looking for some DFS, Underdog, our friends, they're giving you a free pick. Lamar Jackson needs 1 yard on Thursday Night Football in order for you to cash. So make sure to go get that free pick. The best way to do that is to sign up using our code LEAGUEFFB. When you sign up, not only will you get the Lamar Jackson free pick, but they'll give you up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Make sure you sign up using code LEAGUEFFB, or the easiest way is to go click the link in the description or the link in the top of the comment section. It will be linked in both of those places for you, and that's the best place to do that. So that being said, folks, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you go join the free Discord. That's all the free promo I'm going to give you today. I will see you on our next episode when we talk about the running back positions here for week 10. But with all of that out of the way, I'll see you on the next video. Till then, peace out.